and this love story is going to leave you with so much yearning and longing. Beautiful, heartbreaking, but it's very real. This book absolutely tore me apart and will stick with me forever. Madonna in a Fur Coat, and I will show you the author because I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Magical novel about a Turkish man who falls in love with an artist in 1920s Berlin, recreates a vanished era and dramatizes a doomed relationship with verve, depth, and poignancy. The result is a miniature masterpiece. I would completely agree with all of that. This is such an impactful book. I love watching people talk about books almost as much as I love reading books, so let's get into it. There'll be some spoilers, although the back of the book kind of tells you anyways it's a doomed relationship, so I don't think I'll say anything that's too surprising, but I won't spoil the ending because there is a bit of a twist and turn that happens, so I won't ruin that. One of my favorite new things to do is go through the GoodReads reviews and see what people thought about it. Oh, it doesn't give me a pronunciation. Rafe only, and I searched Rave. We start off the book from the perspective of a young man who is working with Rave. I don't know how to pronounce it, I'm gonna say Rave. I'm so sorry if that's wrong. Working with him, and he finds him so plain and boring that it almost infuriates him. It does infuriate him because he doesn't react to anything his boss does. If his boss yells at him, he doesn't get angry. He just kind of goes to work, does his work, and goes home, and there's nothing else really to his personality. However, then one day this older man, Rav, starts to get sick. The young man goes to see him and he says, I have these journals, can you get rid of them essentially before I die? Then we read these journals, and that takes us back to Rav's 20s to study abroad, to get an education to take over his father's business, and he goes to the museum one day, or the gallery, and becomes absolutely enthralled in this painting. It's a self-portrait called Madonna in a Fur Coat, and he ends up going to this museum day after day and just staring at it until one day a woman approaches him. She notices he's been staring at it daily. Little does he know it's actually the artist of the painting. We can still see characteristics of the older Rav to his younger self. A huge part of him and his heart changes throughout the story, and going along with him on that journey is very beautiful. That said, I had always been one of those quiet boys who preferred dreams to the real world. I was, in addition, absurdly shy, and therefore often mistaken for a fool, which upset me deeply, for nothing terrified me more than the prospect of correcting a false impression. One of the most beautiful things about the novel, I think, is the way his internal and external environment interact with each other. He starts to notice the beauty in every day. He's around him, but he feels so detached from it and empty. It all felt like that at some point. You know, when we're really happy or in love, we might notice that the sky is extra blue. This meal we're sharing with them tastes really good, and then when we're sad, it's kind of like maybe you can't even eat, you're so upset. It does play a big role how we see our environment. It plays a lot into perspective. They were having fun, they were alive, while I stood apart, locked up inside my own head, and watched. Perhaps what I will write will not be nearly as painful as what I have lived, and it will bring me some relief. I would love to talk about Maria because I loved her. Obviously, she's a flawed character. She's so strong-willed, and she knows exactly who she is from the beginning of meeting him. She tells him, I'm not going to be able to love you the way that you want me to. That's just not who I am. She is not afraid to be an outsider because of who she is. She says, like, because I have non-traditional views on marriage and relationships, people and women don't relate to me very much. Like, she's kind of alone because she said a lot of her female friends want to get married and have kids and don't think about things as deeply as she does, and the purpose behind things like marriage and relationship. Do you know why I hate you? You and every other man in the world, because you ask so much of us, as if it were your natural right. Mark my words, for it can happen without a single word being uttered. It's how men look at us and smile at us. It's how they raise their hands. To put it simply, it's how they treat us. You'd have to be blind not to see how much confidence they have and how stupidly they achieve it. And if you need a measure of their arrogant pride, all you need to see is how shocked they are when an advance is rejected. And our duty is to bow down and obey, to give them whatever they want, but we shouldn't. We shouldn't give away a single bit of ourselves. It's revolting, this arrogant male pride. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes, well, I think that's why maybe we can be friends, because I can't see a trace of that awful male pride in you. You're the first man who hasn't interrupted me or tried to pull me away from my ideas or tried to bring me round. What I mean is, you're the first man who's listened to what I have to say without once trying to discipline me. I can see in your eyes that you understand me. That's so relatable. I like how she defines a real man as a soft man. That's very sweet. And there's this wedge throughout the novel between her loving him, and we never fully know what it is. She does say she has mood swings, so I'm not sure if the author was kind of insinuating a mental health thing or if it's maybe a sexuality thing. She does kind of mention women at one point, but maybe she just doesn't feel romantic or physical attraction to men. I don't know what it is. It very much fascinates me. If you've read this book, tell me what you think it is, because I was just racking my brain trying to figure out what exactly it was that was holding her back from him, because she likes him so much as a person. She says, "You are so different from any other guy I've met because you're not demanding things from me, especially physical intimacy, and you're not pushy, and you respect my boundaries." That's the most beautiful part, I think, of the story, is that he doesn't try to change her. He loves her exactly the way she is, and he knows that she could be moody and that she isn't as emotionally available as as he would want her to be, but he adores her nonetheless, and adores her in a way that we all wish to be loved. When she gets sick, he cares for her. He is there every single day. When we have marriage vows, we say in sickness and in health. This man really proved that. He loved her in sickness and in health. To read the novel from the perspective of a man with complete adoration is really fun. I think a lot of the time in literature we see this level of admiration and love from the woman's perspective, and especially because this novel was written. This book was first published in 1943 and the author is male, so it's really cool to know that somebody who's male in 1943 wrote from this perspective of a man and also wrote such a strong female character. I just really like that. I believe this article was written by one of his children, so I'm just going to read a portion of it I found interesting. "No one wanted a story about a strong woman and a weak man. This was not the way people were supposed to be. Certainly not the way Turkish men were to conduct themselves. The belated success of the novel seemed to come out of nowhere, its message resonating with a new generation in Turkey. It topped the bestseller list. Suddenly people, mainly young people, were all reading and talking about this book. It has a modern way of looking at relationships between men and women. This book speaks to people, young women in particularly really love it." He was ahead of his time, and this book was a bit ahead of its time. With the two of them, what I enjoyed is their companionship right off the bat. It's something I felt very relatable to my life, that it was comfortable and easy, and they could walk for time without speaking and other times talk a lot, and I feel like that very much so in my life, and it's such a good feeling when you just easily flow together and click, and it's just a wonderful thing. So that was very beautiful to read. Another section I wanted to discuss is the risks we take for love, because he kind of contemplates, do I stay the way I was, where I was just emotionless and everything was fine and every day was plain, or do I risk this amount of love and my foot's asleep? Do I risk this amount of love but also risk the hurt that comes after? And honestly, it's interesting to ask that question because I don't think he ever fully recovers from this love that he feels for her. From my understanding, I don't believe the love affair that they have is that long, so it's kind of like, was this lifetime of pain worth it? That really got me in my head and kind of affected my emotions for a few days, honestly. Things so deep and profound, you start to overthink your own personal life, and that's totally what happened to me, but I think that's just a sign of a really good book. The fact that she knows exactly who she is, and she's so big and bold and blunt with him, and he just loves her and accepts her, that's also a very relatable feeling to me. Like, not having to shrink yourself down or water yourself down in order to be with someone is just the most pure, authentic, wonderful form of love, and that's how I felt from the beginning. My romantic relationship is that I haven't had to be any smaller in order to fit into a tiny box for him to like, and if anything, I feel like the biggest and best version of myself, which is how we're supposed to feel. And that's why I also think she appreciates him so much, is because he just lets her be. She's an artist, she can be moody and loud, and she can be unpredictable, and he just lets her be her. I have at the top of some of my pages written, whole page, stunning admiration of a woman. So I can't read a whole page to you, but it's just beautiful. I've annotated a lot of this book. How familiar her voice was. This must be because I was so intimately acquainted with every line in her face and could read between them. For a moment she came closer, almost close enough to embrace. Seeing the warm glow in her eyes, I thought my heart might stop. Heaven was only centimeters away. All I wanted was to pour out my heart to her, the good with the bad, the weakness with the strengths, holding nothing back, bearing my soul. I had so much to say to her, enough to fill a lifetime. I had so much to tell her, things I had never even admitted to myself. Neither of us spoke, and how I savored that silence. This book honestly made me cry quite a few times, and it's hard to make me cry in general, especially when reading a book, but it just moved me so deeply and profoundly that I couldn't help it. The last, I would say, 50 pages ripped my heart out, but it's also just so beautiful that it's like worth it. But is it? I don't even know. Maybe I'm just as conflicted. There is a very clear turning point when he decides to kind of switch off his emotions and just, you know, go through the motions of life, where he becomes that detached, kind of cold man, and he even ends up marrying somebody and having children with her, and he doesn't even feel connected to his own family. Like, this love he had with Maria changed the course of his life right up until the end. I don't know what to think of that. Is it really beautiful, or is it just completely heartbreaking? I don't know. It kind of depends how you look at it, but I think he had been almost not angry with her, but he had, I know, actually I'm not going to say this because I don't want to spoil the ending. His heart is really unable to go on and love anything or anyone else because he's so consumed by his love for Maria, no matter how long, even 10 years later. Another thing I think the book did really well was depicting when you're so happy you're almost sad. Like, have you ever been in a moment with someone and you're like, this is such a beautiful moment, oh my god, this moment's gonna pass. You know, and I have that sometimes where you just feel so happy and grateful that you're almost sad that that moment's not forever. And it's kind of the dichotomy of life, and I think the book really captured that beautifully. I snuggled up to her, my head close to hers, my elation tinged because I knew that I would never be able to bear any truth that might take me away from her. We had found in each other rare treasures. Having never known such intimacy before, I was desperate to protect it, and perhaps what I desired most was to possess her wholly and absolutely, body and soul, but I was so fearful of losing what I already had that I did not dare look away from it. And that night I also came to understand how hollow life would be without her, as hollow as a walnut shell, tossed by the winds. In the beginning, it was curiosity that kept us talking. We were always looking for new things in each other. How I loved her. I had opened my heart to the world I saw in her. We were not afraid to reveal to each other the most secret corners of our souls and then quarrel. Always seeking each other out, always looking for new ways to please each other, and always richer for it. That night, I came to understand how it was possible to be more attached to another person than to life itself. Okay, now let's get on to some GoodReads reviews. So this is from Jack Edwards, who is of course a very famous booktuber, and I look up to him very much. You think you know yearning, and then you read Madonna in a fur coat. You think you know the fleeting nature of happiness, and then you read Madonna in a fur coat. You think you know unrequited love, and then you read Madonna in a fur coat. Could not agree with that review more. This one is from Vit Babenko. He desperately falls in love, then accidentally he meets the woman and they are acquainted. Their relationships are uncertain and strange and poetic. I really like the way that they put this. But because of his timidity, because of his shyness, I'm just gonna say I don't know how to pronounce that word, because of his shyness or his weak will or his ill luck, or those put together, he in the end loses his true love of his life. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. What really was at play there that makes him kind of lose her? But that's not the full ending. There's way more to it, so. Gabrielle wrote, "This is a tricky one to review. It's not a new story. It was originally written in the 40s, nor is it especially original. I think Star-Crossed Lovers must be the oldest story in the world. But this one is written with such melancholy, longing, introspection, and quiet passion that it turns out to be unlike any story of love lost I have ever read before." I really enjoyed this review because I agree, it's so unique in its own way. Something about this book just feels really unique and refreshing. After reading this book and this love story, it got me thinking back to the beginning of the book where the young man was just so annoyed by how plain Rafe was. And I feel like some of us, we may have experienced people like that in our life where they just have no personality and they seem so dull, or they're just very surface level. But sometimes there could be a reason. They may just be that way, but they also may have just gone through something so horrifically sad that they've kind of shut out the world and shut out who they are, which we see happen to him. It gave me a lot more empathy for certain people that are just surface level. You know, a lot of people are the way they are for a reason. Those are my thoughts on this book. Please leave me your thoughts on this book down below. If you end up reading it, or your thoughts on the video, I would love to hear. Subscribe for more book content. I absolutely love classic literature and some modern fiction, so if that interests you, please subscribe. I would love to have you here and chat all things books. Let's share our love of literature, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! For as long as I lived, I would travel far and wide, meeting with people whose languages I did or did not know, and everywhere I went, I would be looking for Maria Pewter. In every pair of eyes, I would be searching for the Madonna in a fur coat.